European regulators today announced a new investigation to look at whether Amazon abused its leadership position in the ebook market to favor its own books over those from other booksellers. Specifically, the EU wants to find out if Amazon's contracts with European publishers force them to tell Amazon when a competitor offered better terms than Amazon did. Financial Times media correspondent Henry Mance joins us to talk about this story. Welcome to you, Henry.
Thanks, Mike.
Now, how might Amazon's contract allegedly reduce choice for European consumers in the e-book market? I'm not really following the dots all the way.
Well, everybody accepts that Amazon is a huge player in the e-book market. In fact, it's the biggest player in Europe by a big distance. And what's being alleged here is that there are clauses in the contracts which say to a publisher, if you want to do a deal with anyone else to sell your books, you have to let us know what the terms are, and you have to offer us terms that are at least as good. And that means that any rival to Amazon isn't going to be able to gain the upper hand, isn't going to be able to gain cheaper prices for the books or some other kind of advantage on rights. And so that might make it difficult for someone else, whether it's Apple or maybe a small retailer or book chain, to come into the market and really challenge Amazon when it comes to ebooks.
Henry, in your piece, you said that this investigation was not prompted by a particular complaint. So what made the commission start investigating this?
Well, we know the commission is pretty active. It has pretty wide-ranging powers. It likes looking at how big companies, and they're often US companies, are sort of using their power in Europe. But I think you can't ignore the fact that publishers have been mad at Amazon for years. They find their market, which, before the market was, we make books, we produce books, we give them to bookstores or maybe to supermarkets, and they keep on selling them. And it had never come up against anyone like Amazon, which was quite as big, quite as aggressive, and which demanded reducing prices all the time. So they've been calling for competition authorities to do something, antitrust laws to come into play. And this is, I think, one of the first real bits of good news for them in Europe.
Every time Amazon is hit with some sort of antitrust accusation, they always counter with, hey, we're lowering prices, and that's great for literacy. And in this case, I imagine they're doing the same thing. And if that is the case, if Amazon's approach actually ends up lowering the price for ebooks, despite the effect it has on competitors, why is that an antitrust case in Europe? Is the yardstick different in Europe than it is in the US?
You're exactly right, Mike. This is what Amazon has appealed to directly today. It's we do the best thing by readers. And you'll remember there was a big fight in the US between Hachette, which publishes some books by J.K. Rowling, author of Harry Potter, and Amazon, because Amazon wanted the prices to be lower and the publisher said, actually, we want the prices to be higher. The rules are slightly different or interpreted slightly differently in Europe. In the US, what regulators are concerned about is how much consumers are paying. So Amazon offers really low prices on books, and the regulators will say, well, that's a great thing. In the EU, what we're seeing is a sort of broader perspective saying, well, let's not pay just the attention to what consumers are doing today. Let's look at whether the market is preventing new competitors, because new competitors could offer things that Amazon isn't offering. They could offer better subscription services, better ways of finding the books you like, for example. So if Amazon is crushing all of those competitors before they can establish themselves, then we may not have the best offers available to consumers.
So if, you had mentioned that many of the technology companies that European regulators are kind of going after here tend to be U.S. companies. Is the competition commissioner, I think her name is Margaret Vestager, you can help me with the pronunciation perhaps, does she have like a kind of is there a categorical program to knock the U.S. technology companies down a peg, or is it just coincidental that most of the companies that are being hauled before these various commissions in Europe happen to be Silicon Valley or Seattle-based U.S. companies?
Yeah, no way I'm going to pronounce correct your pronunciation on those names. So, so it sounded great to me. I think certainly, President Obama has said this looks a lot like protectionism. You have US companies who have come up with great products. I mean, remember the Amazon Kindle, remember what Google's done in search. and suddenly regulators are saying you've been too successful. The counter argument, and the argument that the Europeans are using, is that a lot of these firms that are complaining are also American. So in the case of Google, you had complaints from Yelp and TripAdvisor, who are competing with Google in certain parts of their business. And you know, some of the big publishers are also American. I mean, HarperCollins is owned by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, for example. So it's not really a case of American companies against European politicians. It's more about American companies against other American companies and some European companies in Europe. One of the really important things is that often these big American players are stronger in Europe than they are in America. So in the US book market, you have Barnes & Noble. It's been a big successful player in physical bookstores, but it also has some business in ebooks. In Europe, Barnes & Noble is really a weak player. So Amazon in the UK has 90% of the market, according to some estimates. So the dynamics are different. It wouldn't be quite fair, I think, to say that European regulators and US regulators just look at the same situation and interpret it differently. The facts on the ground are different in Europe.
But Henry, does Amazon do the same thing in the US to keep its prices down, or is this unique to how it operates in Europe?
Good question. We really don't know about the detail of these contracts. And this is one of the things that I think journalists like me, but lots of people who are concerned about what's going on in the book market and who want to understand better the dynamics, this is one of the things they complain about. We just don't know about these negotiations between publishers and Amazon. There are really strict non-disclosure agreements. And one of the things that publishers are calling for is let's sort of open it up. Let's see what practices are being performed and whether that helps consumers or not. So whether Amazon has the right in the US to have the best possible terms it's slightly a mystery.